We are recording now, and for starters, if you don't mind, go ahead and give me your name and the spelling of your name, and then the title that you'd like to see on the air.
Hi, this is Vu Truong, V-U, last name is T-R-U-O-N-G, Vu Truong. I'm the CEO of Aridis Pharmaceuticals.
Excellent. So we've been seeing some headlines about some progress made with your, what would you call it? It's called a MAB, is that the AR-711?
Yes, it is a monoclonal antibody, and so MAB is for short for monoclonal antibodies. So we've recently published exciting data of a new approach to treating COVID-19. And the antibody itself was discovered by screening the blood of convalescent COVID-19 patients that have survived the infection and looking for a highly neutralizing antibody from these patients. And these antibody may have helped them manage the infection and overcome the infection. And so the antibody that we are working with is significantly potent as tested in vitro in terms of binding to the virus, in terms of neutralizing the virus in cell culture condition, so in vitro. It is also shown to be very potent when tested in animals, where we infect the animals first with the real virus, and then inject the drug either by parenterally or by inhalation, by letting the animal run around and expose to them nebulized liquid aerosol containing the antibody. And there we show that that the amount of antibody that is taken up into the lung of these animals is substantially higher than if you were simply to inject the antibody through the vein or inject the antibody through the intramuscular route. And so why this is important is that the virus really initially infects patients generally through the respiratory tract. And so the lung serve as the main target organ for the infection. And that's where a lot of the disease symptomology radiates from. And that's where the virus reservoir is mainly concentrated in that and your nasal cavity initially. And so the problem is that when you inject an antibody parenterally, less than 1% of that drug actually penetrates the lung. Very few people actually appreciate this fact. And so because of poor lung uptake in a lung disease, a lung infection, generally the antibody that are being tested clinically needs to be administered at very high dose. So for example, President Trump received 8,000 milligrams of the antibody by a company called Regeneron, and so we estimated only a very small fraction of that actually ends up in his lung to mediate its effect. So our approach combines two very attractive attributes. First is that the antibody by itself is very potent. It's more potent than any other antibodies that are in late-stage clinical testing now, and that data is published. We've disclosed that last week. Secondly, by delivering directly to the target organ, it further improves how effective the antibody could work, because you have a much higher concentration of the drug in the lung than otherwise would be achievable if one inject the antibody parenterally. But I think the other reason why this is such an interesting approach is that when one delivers the drug by aerosol, this is a route of administration that is very easy to do. It's painless. We can simply have the patient pick up a nebulizer that most pharmacy would sell, and simply put the solution, the drug solution, in the nebulizer and breathe it. It'll take 2 to 5 minutes and the administration is done. So you can self-administer yourself. You don't need to go into physician's office. This is what asthma medicine, a lot of asthmatic patients do, right? They treat themselves, medicate themselves all the time, some on daily basis. And so these are widely available means to deliver drug. Now, why is this important? It is because worldwide, over 90% of all symptomatic COVID-19 patients are actually not hospitalized. They're at home, either quarantined, they're at home because they may not be sick enough to go to the hospital, or they may have been in a hospital, they're not sick enough to stay in the hospital, but they're still shedding virus, and there's still transmission risk. They're still at a risk of health deterioration because they just got a positive test. And so we have this large unmet need, medical need, and a large fraction of COVID-19 patients that don't have proper treatment coverage. So we are suffering as a country and worldwide from poor treatment coverage. And so we think that the best way to impact on treatment coverage, therefore transmissibility, therefore the progression of the pandemic, is by developing a therapy that would facilitate an expansion of treatment coverage.
Did your researchers learn anything by the treatment of the president?
Well, I think we've learned that antibodies can be very effective. We know from preliminary data that there is a positive impact on viral load when administered with the antibody. We know that these antibodies are generally safe. We know that in 2 large studies now, one by Eli Lilly and one by Regeneron, that the hospitalization rate is cut by a substantial margin, over 50%, when you're treated with the antibody. We also know that convalescent plasma, COVID-19 plasma, also is clinically beneficial in several studies now. And what's in that plasma is, of course, antibodies to COVID-19. So antibody as a treatment for COVID-19 holds great promise. And I think the world's going to need to have a treatment despite having a vaccine, several vaccines that may be available, because you're not going to see a vaccine that is 100% effective. If we're lucky, we may see a 70% efficacy with a vaccine, and that's actually a win for a vaccine. That means that 30% of the patients the vaccine don't work on. So number one, those patients are going to need treatment. Also, we know that a large majority, maybe 30 to 50% of individuals, says that they will not take a vaccine, even if there's an effective vaccine available. Those folks also will need treatment when they're infected. So there's always going to be a need for treatment.
And so you've had success with hamsters in eliminating COVID-19, and have you, what's the next process into getting, being able to test humans?
Well, I think this is we clearly would want to do additional studies just to make sure the data are solid, and even though we clearly think that they are. This is a key animal model that a lot of drug developers use to assess the effectiveness of their drug candidates, and so we're certainly using the right model, well-controlled studies. At this point, there is enough data here for us to move aggressively into the clinic, and we plan to be in patient in the first half of next year. And we're going to move very aggressively, just like some of the other companies have, to get this into the hands of patients. We expect to move as quickly as Eli Lilly or other companies have, and so we expect to have data very soon.
That's wonderful. As you know, the race is on. There's so many companies attempting to get vaccines out, and then now also these MABs antibody solutions out as well. Is the White House working in any way with you to move things along more quickly?
Well, you know, we are having discussion with a number of stakeholders. Some are government related that could potentially see the value of something like this. You know, we think that this certainly offers a very intriguing solution in terms of having a potent drug that is delivered using a very convenient way. And it's able to reach a much wider audience in a shorter period of time, and using a method that is generally, you know, well established in terms of, you know, nebulized treatment.
Excellent. How excited are you about the work you've done and the progress you've made so far?
Well, you know, I think the data that we're seeing in a key model is quite exciting because of the dose that we could that we need to give to achieve essentially complete eradication of the virus in these animals at a dose that is exceedingly low, and thereby enabling the manufacturing of the drug supplies at quantities that would be able to cover, let's say, the US population, because 8,000 milligrams, which is what President Trump got, we actually don't have the manufacturing capacity in this country to make 8,000 milligrams to treat, you know, the entire US population. That infrastructure does not exist. And so I think something like this could potentially be very valuable in terms of making sure that the drug works. It is easily deliverable and accessible by you know, a large population, but also that our manufacturing infrastructure can accommodate.
And you're kind of what you described, would that be this, you know, something similar to an inhaler that a asthmatic patient would use?
Absolutely. So we've engineered our formulation to be compatible with a wide variety of nebulizers that local pharmacy, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS would carry. So, for example, your physician could call in a dose. You just simply go to the pharmacy, pick up that dose. Along the way, you also pick up a nebulizer. You go home and you drop that liquid, which contains the drug, the antibody, into the nebulizer, and you breathe. You just simply breathe it just like any other asthmatic patient treat themselves. And the drug should work better because you're delivering the drug directly to where the site of infection is.
Right. And just visually, if we were to imagine the you know, the dosage that the president received, how would you describe that?
Well, you know, it's certainly a very, very high dose. When you translate that 8,000 milligram into on a per weight basis, that's 100 milligram per kilogram of body weight. That is almost unheard of for an antibody therapy of any kind, and so that's very high, and it's going to be very costly, and it's going to be very difficult to make enough drug to treat everybody, and so I think there's still an unmet need there. That I believe you know, a solution like this could potentially solve.
Well, very exciting news coming from Aridis, and you're based out of San Jose.
Yes.
Well, great talking with you, and appreciate you taking the time for the interview. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Good to be with you.